Before we get started, I have to ask you guys, how the hell are you doing? You two were in Chicago at Labor Notes, running around like ants with all your different tasks and everything. And meanwhile, I'm here in Jacksonville, Florida for some strange reason, trying to process things. But of course, you couldn't actually upload stuff for me to process. And then you had the drive back. And then what, 3 days? Now here we are at the end of the week.
We
Supposed to
had
be a holiday, but well, we know how that goes.
we were gonna take today off. Shout out to Juneteenth, but yeah, no, it was a great trip though. We stopped in Akron on the way out to visit the Rubber Man or the Man of Rubber, or however it is that we say that, and
That's that big statue with the tire.
it's very cool. It's very cool. And then Chicago was great. We didn't get a whole lot of sleep, but then we kind of knew that going in.
Well, but you folks weren't there just to cover
No,
the Labor Notes Conference. You were also there to run the Great Labor Arts Exchange, which is a separate thing, but sort of integrated into Labor Notes. How does that work exactly?
this is our third time at Labor Notes, and it's really an organic part. We had, I think, 4 pages of programming this year. And one of the things we came up with brand new this year was, in addition to all the actual sessions and workshops on everything from puppet making to labor songs, we also had couple of dozen workshops where it would be a workshop on, let's say, organizing at Amazon. But then one of our singers would go in and do a couple of minutes song, and then somebody like Patrick or I would pop up and do a pitch for Labor Heritage Foundation, and then we would go on our merry way, and they'd go on with their workshop. So it was a way to really bring the labor arts to the workshops. We missed you though, Harold, because I was going to have you declaim, portions from laborific plays because we had no theater representation. So
Next time, I'll start working that monologue from Waiting for Lefty.
that's actually exactly what I had in mind.
Well, you actually covered the Great Labor Arts Exchange at Labor Notes on your show this week, the Labor Heritage Power Hour, right?
Oh, nice segue. Nice segue. Yeah, we did. The workshop was called Art is a Hammer to Shape the World. It was an hour-and-a-half workshop. We've got about 20 minutes taken from that. And then we also include a couple of these. We called them labor culture moments when we'd sort of pop up and do a little bit of labor culture, including one from Jordan Bridges at the New Orleans Workers Center for Racial Justice.
I'm grateful to the Labor Arts Exchange because we need joy in our movements. We need song in our movements.
Well, even though Labor Notes is on everybody's mind who attended or people like me who missed it, and, we're catching up on all the stuff we missed, that doesn't mean there weren't a lot of radio shows and podcasts released over the past week, right?
That's right. And so for the show today, we all agreed on economics for the people.
The news really is of no value. It's really just an economic entity to strip assets from.
Grocery nerds.
After Amazon bought the company, you could see a lot of those changes. It was a lot of micromanaging, like really repetitive, unnecessary work.
Next generation carriers.
So in their times, it was like, the masculinity and people all like macho and all this other stuff.
Class matters.
They were challenging from some kind of a working class perspective the policies of the Democratic Party, and the way that they were crushed really put me in the mood for something different.
That's all coming up next on the Labor Radio Podcast, weekly, coming at you now. This is the Labor Heritage Power Hour,
a weekly radio show celebrating the cultural heritage of the American worker.
coming to you from WPFW 89.3 FM in Washington, D.C., heard nationwide on the Pacifica Network.
And a proud founding member of the Labor Radio Podcast Network, where the people speak.
I'm Chris Garlock.
And I'm Elise Bryant. This week, we're fresh back from Chicago and the 2026 Great Labor Arts Exchange at Labor Notes, where thousands of labor activists, musicians, artists, writers, and cultural workers gather to share ideas, songs, stories, and strategies for building worker power through culture.
The Labor Heritage Foundation's annual Great Labor Arts Exchange has always been built around a simple idea: that culture isn't an accessory to organizing, it's part of how we organize.
That's right, Chris. And nothing captures that spirit better than a panel called Art is a Hammer to Shape the World.
Moderated by a longtime union organizer and my good friend Ken Grossinger, author of Artworks: How Organizers and Artists Are Creating a Better World Together. The panel brought together artists, musicians, educators, and organizers to explore how culture helps workers build power, strengthen organizations, and create lasting social change.
On the panel were textile artists Tabitha Arnold, Josh McPhee from the Just Seeds Cooperative, both of whom we've had on the show, and Edwin Morales, LaBoy, from the Puerto Rican Teachers Federation. Oh, and I was on it too. Let's listen in.
Good morning. Welcome to Art is a Hammer to Shape the World. I've got to start off with some good news. Right now, as we speak, unionized workers are pulling down Trump's name from the Kennedy Center. Unions and community organizations embrace art when they feel like they need to. So we throw up a picket line and we invite a singer-songwriter to come and sing songs so that sustains people's momentum and boosts their morale. Or we see a great film like Norma Ray or Harlan County, and we use it to rally the troops.
Textile artist Tabitha Arnold says culture is more than decoration. It's a language organizers need to learn to speak. Tabitha lives and works in Chattanooga, Tennessee.
I believe that art and culture are a language, and I think if you're a good organizer, you need to be organizing in every language, and you need to communicate with everyone in the way that they communicate. There is so much about the labor movement that I think is so profound that we need to share with people. We need to share what it feels like to be part of a union and to have power, collective power, for the first time in your life, possibly. And I think that words and speaking don't always cover that, and that's where culture can be a language to share that with people.
Next up, Edwin Morales LaBoy of the Puerto Rican Teachers Federation.
Edwin reminds us that culture isn't just about expression.
It's also about identity, memory, solidarity, and bringing people into movements in the first place.
I'm a math teacher. I'm also a plenero. What's a plenero? This is las plenas. Plenas is a musical genre. In Puerto Rico, it's a folkloric music that is traditionally used in protests in our country. It plays a central role in our social struggles. And culture isn't just one strategy that we use. It's not a secondary strategy. It is a front and center. And because in Puerto Rico, people aren't just organizing because of economic issues. They're organizing around structural issues, and we're using our values, our worldviews, the ideology of workers.
Next, we'll hear from Brooklyn artist and organizer Josh McPhee.
Building on what was already said, I think that the culture of movements is a language, and unfortunately, I think that in other contexts, that's much more understood, but in an Anglo, particularly US context, the language that we have to describe the kind of work that we do in the cultural realm fails us. Because we either call ourselves artists, which then puts us into the purview of sort of individual self-expression, or we call ourselves designers, which puts us into the purview of kind of like state or commerce articulation. And there's no real language we have to talk about collective expression. just doesn't really fit under either art or design. And then culture is almost too broad to really like be a powerful tool. So I'm really interested in trying to figure out how we develop the language to talk about what we do so it doesn't get absorbed into these other terrains and then used against us.
Josh McPhee. Our next panelist needs no introduction around here. Labor Heritage Foundation board member, longtime labor educator, DC Labor Course director, and my co-host, Elise Bryant, offered her own take on the panel's theme.
I want to talk about song. I think of it not so much as a hammer, because if the only tool you have is a hammer, every problem looks like a nail. Mm-hmm. And we got problems that are more variety than nails. So, and I think of music and singing, particularly, as a blender. It brings people together. The way you all came together just now when we were singing the song, you feel the energy in the room change? And you're looking at each other and going, that is the power of song.
We'll return to Ken's panel in a moment, but first, let's look at one of the innovations introduced at this year's Great Labor Arts Exchange.
Throughout the weekend, selected workshops and panels began with brief labor culture moments. Songs, poems, and performances designed to organically weave labor arts and culture into the broader Labor Notes Conference.
Here is one of those moments featuring Jordan Bridges of the New Orleans Workers Center for Racial Justice.
Lunch, everybody good? Yeah. Awesome. Well, my name is Jordan Bridges, coming to y'all from New Orleans, the New Orleans Workers Center for Racial Justice. So glad to be in a room full of environmentally aligned people that are just conscious. I think the work that we do is so important. But before we begin, how many deep breaths have y'all taken today? None? Zero? All right, we're gonna do a quick count and get in the mood, okay? Everybody good? And take a deep breath in. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and out. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. One more time. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and out. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Now, I'm grateful to the Labor Arts Exchange because we need joy in our movements. We need song in our movements.
Let's close with a little more music from the Great Labor Arts Exchange closing concert at Labor Notes.
In fact, Elise, that's the name of the group, the Labor Notes.
1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm gonna tell you fascists, you may be surprised. There's people in this world who are getting organized. You're bound to lose, you fascists bound to lose. Oh, you fascists bound to lose. Oh, you fascists bound to lose. Oh, you fascists bound to lose. You're bound to lose, you fascists bound to lose. Fascists
Thanks so much for listening to the Labor Heritage Power Hour.
Coming to you from the studios of WPFW 89.3 FM in Washington, D.C., and heard on stations across America on the Pacifica Network.
We're also a proud founding member of the Labor Radio Podcast Network, where the people speak.
The Power Hour is produced by the Labor Heritage Foundation,
the art and soul of the American labor movement.
Our comprehensive labor arts calendar and free weekly newsletter are available at laborheritage.org.
Sing it.
Tell it.
Share it. Solidarity forever. This is Elise Bryant from the Labor Heritage Power Hour. We're proud to be part of the Labor Radio Podcast Network, with more than 200 labor radio shows and podcasts from across the country and around the world. The Labor Radio Podcast Network, where working people speak. Find us at laborradionetwork.org.
People who listen to the show have never heard of Grocery Nerds because this is a new show to the network, but it's not, because it's sort of a new iteration of The Checkout, which is a show we haven't heard from in a while.
Patrick and I actually listened to that on the road while we were driving back, and I agree. It was really nice to hear from Errol again. We've had him on our show for a while. He was a pretty good regular at the network meetings. Listening to his show, what I was reminded of is what an excellent interviewer he is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is the thing about Errol. The guy writes articles for Forbes magazine. Right. He does all of this research on trends and income versus expenses and that kind of stuff. You would think he'd be really buttoned down and somebody you'd see on the Bloomberg report, but he still remembers what it's like to work in the aisles in the stockroom, and you can tell that when you listen to his show.
Well, in this extract that we include, Edward Dupree is a Whole Foods worker who helped organize a union at Whole Foods in, I believe it's the Philadelphia area, in the years after the pandemic. The section we're going to listen to, he's kind of talking about the way in which the work culture at Whole Foods changed after the company was purchased by Amazon. And it was these changes, really, combined with the pandemic and the introduction of e-shopping, that precipitated this union movement within this Whole Foods store.
You know, this is actually really timely because the NLRB just filed an order saying that Amazon does have to negotiate with the Whole Foods Union. So I'm really glad we're including this.
Welcome to Grocery Nerds. Grocery Nerds is the leading source for insider commentary and analysis on the U.S. grocery industry, $1.1 trillion a year. I'm your host, Errol Schweitzer. I'm a 30-year grocery industry veteran merchandiser, operator, analyst, and OG grocery nerd. This week's guest is my good friend Ed Dupree, a produce clerk and organizer of the Whole Foods Market Union, the first ever unionized Whole Foods market in the company's history. This week, me and Ed are going to talk about union organizing, what it's like to work at Whole Foods, and what our favorite fruits are. All right. Welcome to Grocery Nerds. Edward Dupree, produce clerk, Whole Foods Market Union organizer, Philadelphia in the house. So good to see you again.
Likewise, how you doing, bro?
Good. I hear you slinging produce still. So you work at Whole Foods Market. That's my alma mater. You know, I worked there for over 14 years. What you and your colleagues have done, though, is extraordinary. So why don't you give us a little bit of history here in that you guys at this Philadelphia store have organized the first ever Whole Foods Market Union. How did that come about?
It came through just years of working there. The story is like during the pandemic, we had like a really brief, trial run. I think a lot of people, we had knew some people at like Trader Joe's, Mom's, a couple other grocery stores that were kind of, just conversation in the area. Our campaign kind of like petered off after a while. And then around 2023, I met my buddy Ben, and he was like really gung-ho. And the lore I love telling is like, I was like, this is weird. I was like, this guy came in really hot. But after getting to know him, I was like, okay, he's serious. I always told myself after things fell apart in the last run, I just needed one good guy to start with. And if you were dedicated and really believed in it, I was there for it. So we started talking to our coworkers. I think the first time was like we got 8 or 9 people together in like a little restaurant around the corner from our store one afternoon and was just like, what are issues we can organize around? We went from there to building like grievances. We started with like a petition, but people were like a little hesitant about, signing petitions. So it became like a simple yes or no union support. Then we went throughout departments and eventually the whole store. The spring before we filed, I think it was 2024, we spoke with the UFCW and Teamsters actually, and we're like, which one's the best option? A lot of people on our OC were really comfortable and like the history behind the UFCW and their experience in the field. So we went with them, and then it was just getting cards, and we went public in November 2024, and ever since then it's been insane.
What was the impetus? Like, what really pushed you guys? When I was at Whole Foods, there was a couple of unionization campaigns that kind of went nowhere. The company usually responded by increasing our benefits, increasing wages, trying to make the working conditions better. Like, it was a very soft approach. And it seems like lately, particularly under Amazon, things are a little different. So why don't you give us a sense of what it's like working there now and why there was this impetus for a union push at Whole Foods?
That's the thing. When I first started working there, I kind of saw like the echoes of that, those last little remnants of like a really interesting workplace that had like slightly democratic things. You had the gain sharing. You had a lot of like, we would have like, the quarterly department meetings where you could like vote on and off people.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Yeah, it was that kind of stuff, a lot more input. Yeah, it wasn't as corporate at the time. But after Amazon bought the company, you could see a lot of those changes. It was a lot of micromanaging, like really repetitive, unnecessary work. And then as we got closer to the pandemic, we started getting the e-shoppers in the store. That went from, I think it was Instacart, and then Amazon really implemented their folks in. After that, you could see how they were pushing people. They took away part-time benefits for workers there. It was just a real degradation of the kind of things that you thought of Whole Foods. A lot of the people that have been there for a long time were feeling the same kind of strain, less workers. One thing I always talk about, and it's hilarious now because it's like some weird corporate psychological stuff that they do. So we had like 70 people in produce alone at one point. And we're probably mid 30s now. We hired some people in the past year, but also some of them have left or, been fired. So it's like they tried to like do a little bit of that addressing of the issues, but it still feels the same. And it's a lot of really crazy work that they expect people to do. So those were the main driving forces. I'd say in terms of what we were like, of the things we focused on were pay, healthcare, and like job security. Because a lot of people in like the e-com departments just don't last, front end don't last. And Whole Foods used to be a place where you could, like you said, stay for like 14 years. You know what I mean? Those things got people really frustrated. We just got together, talked about work, and it kind of went from there.
Well, Ed Dupree, total produce nerd, by the way, but you're also the Whole Foods Market union organizer, produce clerk. Thank you so much for making time for Grocery Nerds. Best of luck with everything that you folks are doing out there. It's amazing.
Appreciate you having me on, Errol. Great talking to you, man.
Hey, this is Mark, your host on My Labor Radio, and we're proud to be part of the Labor Radio Podcast Network with more than 200 labor radio shows and podcasts from across the country and around the world. The Labor Radio Podcast Network, where working people speak. Find us at laborradionetwork.org.
Let's talk about economics for the people, which is, I mean, a lot of our shows are serious, so I don't want to say this is more serious, but it's a pretty heavy podcast. So let's maybe talk a little bit about. Well, let's start, Patrick. What are the pieces you pulled out for the show?
Well, you've got Rajiv Ravisankar joining the show, who's a researcher, a former journalist. He's now a doctoral student, and he's talking to the hosts about the recent wave of unionization within journalism, with a range of well-known and high-profile print and online publications. What the sort of economic roots of this are, and how this fits within dramatic changes that we've seen within journalism over the past decade.
And this is one of the things I love about economics for the people. You know, you say economics and people's eyes start to roll back in their heads. They're like, oh God, this is super highbrow. It's like what I just said about Errol and all the reports that he says. I mean, people think that economists are up in rarefied air, but they really bring stuff down to ground level so that the average listener can grasp some of the concepts.
Well, like Grocery Nerds, it's an appropriately named show.
Very much so.
Hello, Kansas City, and anyone listening to us from across the world.
Across the world. It's Spring Thunder in Kansas City again.
Oh, yeah. All right. So we have, again, we always think our shows are really interesting. A very interesting show. We're going to start off with a conversation about unionization efforts and worker co-ops in the news industry. We had a chance to talk to one of our dear friends, Rajiv Ravishankar. He is a labor union trainer and researcher based in Portland, Oregon. He's also a PhD candidate at the University of Oregon focusing on labor and media. Rajiv, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Rajiv, let's turn to unionization.
Yeah.
So here at KKFI, we have 3 staff members who voted last year to unionize with the Communication Workers of America. And keeping the focus on Kansas City for a moment, the local NPR affiliate, KCUR, a lot of their journalists have also voted to unionize under the Communication Workers of America. More broadly, there seems to have been a surge of unionization in newsrooms. Can you tell us more about the efforts and what unions are leading the charge here?
Yeah, it's a really interesting story. I was really drawn to it just given the numbers that you're seeing. Just, you know, the numbers that I've seen, it's increased from that time. I think over a 10-year period, I think from sort of 2010 to 2020, you had 200 union drives with over a 90% success rate. And in the union context, it's like seeing such a high success rate. Yes, these are smaller workplaces, but just to see that kind of success rate is really significant. It's in major outlets, MSNBC, The Atlantic, Forbes, New York Times Tech, Vice Media, Salon, HuffPost, et cetera. And it goes on. And it's often involving, you know, younger workers who come into digital media outlets who don't really have a context for unionization. Maybe they're put in relation with people who've been around longer, but they see this as an avenue to stabilize their lives, to get job security in such a volatile climate where the sort of specter of layoffs and the specter of a big media owner or a hedge fund, you know, coming in and really making decisions about whether you're going to work or not or what your work looks like. I think they're responding to that and are responding, you know, again, through a vehicle of collective action and organizing to be able to create protections and to win contracts. It's happening. You know, News Guild CWA is at the leading edge of this. They have been spearheading many of these campaigns. And yeah, I think it's an incredible success story because many of these people in the News Guild also who've gotten involved in those union drives also have played a big role in the broader labor movement in terms of doing trainings and, you know, shaping what it looks like for other union members about how to, you know, do new organizing, to do external organizing. So it's a really incredible story. It's one that you could totally miss it actually being in a journalism department at a university because it's something that isn't discussed and you don't really talk to students about in any way. So, a lot of young journalists who never really realized that, I don't think about being a news worker entering into this industry where there's heavy union activity. And I've been fortunate that I could do a little bit on that front, but often they're going into these settings and figuring it out on their own about how do you unionize, how do you win protections on the job. And a lot of this is, I think part of this is spurred by a digital landscape that is very challenging. It creates new constraints and new expectations about how do you engage with audiences and how do you produce content, how much content do you produce. I think because the labor process within the newsroom has changed, I think unionization has come, it's spiked in response to that.
Mm-hmm. And so what benefits are workers seeing as a result of this unionization?
Yeah, I think that you are seeing increases in pay. You're able to move the pay level up. You can win, these workers have won protections around sexual harassment on the job. They've won changes in terms of how hiring processes play out so that there's been a sort of longstanding thing about newsrooms lacking diversity. So at least having candidates from other, racial and ethnic backgrounds being considered, obviously because of the specter of layoffs hanging over, that even, negotiating what a severance package would look like has been part of it. And I think, one of the big issues, obviously, that's coming up for any media worker, whether it's news media or otherwise, is how AI is coming into these workplaces. So AI protections have been another area that the News Guild and other media unions have really sought to. They're actually at the cutting edge of trying to identify protections, certainly in terms of the implementation, oversight, allowing for use, but then also trying to contain it in a manner that it doesn't lead to job loss. So those are some of the real differences in people's lives and in workers' lives, I think, have been achieved. And, it's creating a standard across the board in a time where there's such volatility in the news industry.
Rajit, thank you so much. So interesting. And thank you for joining us and talking about worker co-ops and unionization in the news and media industry.
Thank you, Rajiv. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Hey, this is Judy Ansell from the Heartland Labor Forum. We're radio that talks back to the boss, and we're proud to be part of the Labor Radio Podcast Network with more than 200 labor radio shows and podcasts from across the country and around the world. The Labor Radio Podcast Network, where working people speak. Find us at laborradionetwork.org.
All right, the next one. Oh, next generation carriers. Next generation carriers.
I was so happy that you guys agreed to keep this in the show because Next Generation Carriers is a letter carriers podcast, and they are very focused on the NALC, the National Association for Letter Carriers. So a lot of people might not think to tune in, but this show is all about the labor movement's relationship to the LGBTQ community. And it's still June, y'all. It's still Pride Month. So it was really great to see these folks spend some time on that.
They organised an enormous, it seems, roundtable. There must have been 8, 9 of them there from all locals all across the country, talking about their experiences being a letter carrier, both within the union, what it's like doing the job, and it was quite long and unwieldy. So this is why you're getting an edited version. There's a lot there. If anyone's interested in listening to the full 90 minutes, I think it's quite rewarding. But we've just got a couple of highlights for you.
Yeah, this is the thing about their show is I don't think they do a lot of editing. They just turn the mic on and they have conversations. So you really feel like you're at the table with people talking about stuff. And that can be really rewarding.
All right. Well, guys, welcome to the Pride episode. This is something that, we've been talking about doing for a little while here at Next Gen. We finally got together a good group of people to do a nice little roundtable. So we're gonna talk about some of the issues facing queer carriers at the post office, why that also affects Light Blue as a whole, and then also some of the things that our union does really well, and then some of the things that our union could do a little bit better at, and some of the different strategies for helping support our fellow carriers. So what would you say to someone who's like, why are queer issues light blue issues? If we're all light blue, why does it matter if you're queer? Can someone kick off that topic?
So for me, it's kind of that argument of, it's like, if they're going to come for one, they're eventually going to come for all. And that if they start attacking even just a section of the LGBTQ plus population, we're a minority group. They're going after the minority of the minority, which is trans folk. And, it's not just going to stop there. It's going to move on to the other letters of our alphabet soup. Like they're going to go after anything that they deem immoral. So it may just be an us problem now, but it's going to eventually become everyone else's problem.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Like, yeah. Did anyone else have anything to weigh in on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's just a way for them to disenfranchise us from each other, right?
Yeah.
We're a union. We stand together. We ain't supposed to be separated from each other based on things that don't even really matter, right? I mean, those things matter to us as individuals. They are our identity, right? But like the attacks have nothing to do with what our purpose is here, right? They're just a way for them to gain power over us.
I think too, the act of like trying to isolate people also kind of helps keep people misinformed as well. Because I know a lot of people in my life who, before me coming out, they didn't think they knew any queer people, and I think the way that, like, especially if you're trying to avoid politics and whatnot, you don't know what's going on. Like, the most you know is that, like, gay marriage is, like, legalized in some areas. And that's kind of, like, the knowledge. So I think people don't even, some people don't even really clock the idea that, like, we're still being, like, persecuted and, like, attacked. Like, there's still a danger happening. So they're like, well, if I think that you're the same as me, then you don't need any extra help. And that's not the case, you know? I think
a lot of you get a parade. What more do you need?
Exactly. Like, they don't clock that the parade is actually, like, supposed to be a protest, and like they're like, whatever. You're just trying to
go back to throwing
party.
bricks.
Yeah. Honestly, yeah. I'm pro that.
So what's it look like to be queer at the post office? Why don't we hit on some of that stuff? Hattie.
So I joined up when I was 25, and in the 10 years of the workforce before that, I had done about 20 different customer service jobs. Coincidentally, it was also, the last one was a call center job for an internet service provider like Innova. And I just needed the exact opposite of inside having people bitch at me. So I went outside. Sorry.
You're good.
I needed to be outside. My mom, she served 40 years as a clerk, and she told me, do not do that. Do not join up with the service. They will work you like a dog. And I said, well, what else am I doing, Mom? I might as well. And I lost 50 pounds that first summer. It was too hot to eat during lunch, and I would just eat one giant meal at the end of the day. I was CCA for a month, and then they had the entire batch in Des Moines converted to PTF.
Oh, wow.
I was PTF for 9 months because the overutilization rule and an amazing steward paid attention and made sure I got full-time regular because of working over 40 for a certain amount of time.
That's dope.
That was awesome.
For sure.
Orlando, do you want to kick us off on this next one? Like, what's cool about working at the PO as a queer person? And then, like, what's something that, I mean, have you run into anything that kind of sucks about working at the PO as a queer man?
As far as a good thing is, because I'm more of like an open person, so like I've actually found out that there's other queers in my office. And there's one guy actually who came to me and said, like, you know, I really like your spirit. I like who you are. You know, I just wish I had that ability. He's an older guy, so he didn't have that. You know what I mean? And I'm just like, well, I think you have that ability. But he just, you know what I mean, during their times, it was like, you know, all the masculinity and people all like macho and all this other stuff.
Yeah.
So that was a good thing for me because it was something that was more uplifting to see that and to show that, you know what I mean, that he appreciated that.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. The downside, which is not really much of the downside from me, but I could see how it could bother or trigger someone else. And it's like, there's times like, for me, like when there's newer people that come in, I try to cling to them because I know how it is to be new and not being able to know the job and nobody there to help you. And you know what I mean? So I try to like uplift them and, you know, push them to go and, you know, stick it out. But the downfall with that is you have points where people make narratives like you guys are together, you're dating, this, that, and the third.
God.
You can't just have friends, you know?
Yeah.
You know, you know.
Yeah, they want to sexualize who you are
Yes,
as a person. It's like, yeah, no, I mean, like, yeah, I've had just look mention something in passing, and then someone like, why do you got to make everything sexual? I was like, bro,
yes,
why did you're the one who immediately started thinking about gay sex when I just mentioned part of who I am? Like, come on,
right?
Like,
exactly.
Get your head out of the gutter.
That's a you thing.
Yeah, that's exactly.
Exactly.
Thank you guys. Thanks to everyone out there listening. Assalamu alaikum. Jai Shri Krishna. Namaste, I think. Hasta luego. Mi hermanos. Bye. Familia. Adios. Solidaridad. Siempre.
Hello, powerful people. This is Seth Harris from the Power at Work blog. We're proud to be a part of the Labor Radio Podcast Network. It has more than 200 labor radio shows and podcasts from across the country and around the world. The Labor Radio Podcast Network, where working people speak. Find us at laborradionetwork.org. That's all one word, laborradionetwork.org. Thanks.
Our last one is Class Matters, which I've always thought was one of the really cool names for a podcast.
I think this is quite an important episode. They're revisiting the making of the American Labour Party 30 years later. They've got Adolph Reed, Rob Wages, and Mark Dudzich. At Labour Notes, I was in a particular session where there was quite hot debate about the relationship of the Labour movement to the Democratic Party, and this is a topic that comes up perpetually. You have some who feel, we're donating to a capitalist party that always lets us down, and others who see it as an opportunity to shape the political sphere, shape the way in which local and state governments operate. It's an evergreen topic, but this is in some ways a cautionary tale, I think, from people who committed 10, 15 years of their life to this effort to make an American Labour Party, which was ultimately unsuccessful. So I'm glad we got a segment in, but again, and this is all the weekly can do, it's kind of the tip of the iceberg, really. If you're into the subject, especially say if you're one of those folks that's always going around saying we need our own party, I think this is worth listening to and considering.
Welcome to Class Matters, the podcast where we ask the question, what would our country look like if it were governed by and for the working class? Class Matters is a project of the Debs Jones Douglas Institute. I'm Catherine Isaac, Executive Director. In our last two episodes, When Compromises Come Home to Roost and Where Do We Go From Here, we looked at 40-plus years of anti-worker compromises that have led to worker frustration with both political parties and to distrust in government. And we examined how the Labor Party effort of the 1990s aimed to channel that anger into an independent working class politics. We discussed possibilities for changing the way labor does politics, including building an issue-based politics independent of the two parties, organizing to change the terms of political debate, and the role of political education. We're picking up that conversation. Episode 17, The Labor Party Experiment 30 Years Later, will revisit the working class political experiment that resulted in a Labor Party founding convention 30 years ago in June 1996. For this conversation, we've gathered some of its key players to reflect on what unions were facing after a decade of Reaganism, new signs of militancy in the labor movement, and how those forces made organizing a labor party a strategic possibility. Joining the podcast are Adolph Reed Jr., Robert Wages, and Mark Dudzik. Welcome, everyone. What I'm hearing from you all is a sense of great frustration among working class people, feeling left behind. Work had become precarious. It was called deindustrialization at that point, and the Democrats seemed to be not too worried about it, right? And that seemed obviously quite alarming. And so how did each of you get from there to thinking that as a labor movement, we needed to get together and break from the Democratic Party? Right? So like just even your personal recollections of like first time you talked about it with Tony Mazzocchi, or that was somebody else who first put the notion in your head that this is something that maybe we should start working on, and eventually, especially you, Bob, put some freaking serious resources behind.
When Tony was elected Secretary of Treasury in 1988, he started a serious discussion internally with our executive board about what are we going to do? Because we were, Ronald Reagan was the president. We had witnessed PATCO. We had witnessed years of meager wage increases and just barely hanging on to the benefits that we had, if at all. So Tony started this conversation, and as everyone knows, Tony liked to try to bring people along, to make them understand that they were not without power if they would just get off their ass and do something about it. And that took hold in OCAW. It took hold in a big way. And it was through his effort to bring people along and to talk about the real frustrations that people were having with the stagnant economy, high interest rates. You couldn't afford a house. So that was the precursor to our executive board resolution defining a new economic and political agenda, which really was the starting point where we thought, at least from our perspective, we were in a position to devote resources and a belief that working class politics weren't dead. And that's what we tried to do. So it's within that framework that enormous frustration and borne out by other government policies. I mean, Bill Clinton served up NAFTA on a silver platter. And what were we to do? Everybody rolled over and played dead. And we just decided we were done with that.
Mark, what about you?
Well, I grew up in New York and then moved to North Jersey in the 80s. So it was basically a single party state Democratic Party was really the only viable party. So it was always kind of just sort of in the atmosphere that the Democratic Party was where things would happen or not happen. And even, I got radicalized, by movements in the late 60s and the 70s. And even though I knew we needed to go beyond the Democratic Party, it just never really connected with me how that's going to happen. But certainly, by the time Jimmy Carter came along, I really got an inkling that something was really totally dysfunctional in that party. And then, the attacks, there's Ted Kennedy tried to challenge Carter in 1980. I was kind of involved. By then, I was much more active in the labor movement stuff and was kind of involved in that stuff, and the Jackson insurgencies. And, say what you will about both of them. They weren't certainly my vision of a working class tribune, but, they were challenging from some kind of a working class perspective the policies of the Democratic Party, and the way that they were crushed really put me in the mood for something different. And then, Tony came along, and OCAW made me believe that it was possible, because we organized a really kind of important internal debate. And, Bob put the resources into it as president, and well, the whole administration did. And then coming into 91, the resources were there. And we began to, talk to each other and validate what was going on. So we would have the resolution that Bob talked about. That was initiated a very deep discussion throughout the union. And we had meetings at our district council levels where we would debate these issues, talk about them. And it really validated that this was, wasn't just Dudzik pissed off about the way Jackson was crushed in 1984. It was all of these problems came together, and that maybe there was a way to move forward to alleviate them. So that was sort of what moved me, I think.
And from that period, Labor Party Advocates was formed, and Tony took the show on the road, right? And started talking with other unions, encouraging them to do the same kind of deep discussion and reflection in their own unions. And I imagine that's about the time you heard about it, Adolf.
Yep. And I've got a very neat story. I can produce the witnesses because I knew what Clinton was. I'd worked in the Arkin campaign in 92. And before the polls closed that November, I knew Clinton was going to screw us. And my good friend and now colleague, Preston Smith, up here in Western Mass, had been meeting with the New Party chapter here. So isn't that a blast from the past, guys? So I was getting reports from him because I was working in Chicago. And there, the New Party was just an adjunct of an SEIU local and Acorn, basically. So I got a call from Preston who said that he was done with the New Party. So I happened to talk with another old friend, and I was kvetching about this. And he asked me if I'd heard about what Mazzocchi was doing with LPA. And I said no. And he mentioned to me that the UE was involved. And I worked very closely with Carl Rosen, who's a good friend. So I called Carl as soon as I got off the phone with Gordon. And Carl said, well, it's funny you asked because he's going to be doing a meeting at our hall Sunday. So I went, and that was the next 15 years of my life.
That's a great story. Thank you. You've been listening to Class Matters, episode 17 with Bob Wages, Mark Dudzik, and Adolf Reed Jr.
Hello, this is Eric Lee from Labor Start. We're proud to be part of the Labor Radio Podcast Network with more than 200 labor radio shows and podcasts from around the world. The Labor Radio Podcast Network, where working people speak. Find us at laborradionetwork.org.
Next up,
shows you should know.
Jacob and Adam from the Valley Labor Report interviewed a lot of people at the AFL-CIO convention in Minneapolis, and they put it together in their show this week.
Organizing for Change, Simon and Martin, and the impact of dynamic or surge pricing on wages, which if anybody's been trying to go to the World Cup, they know all about dynamic surge pricing.
Next up, it's not about crack, it's about plumbing. On Pipe Up, Mark talks to the QA director.
I'm sorry. Folks, he just made that up too. Like I said, we don't have a script today, so...
That was gold, brother. That
it
was
really
gold.
was. I'm sorry, Patrick. Back to you. Carry on.
Do the line again? Or...
No. Just keep going. This is all staying in, just as is.
Mark talks with UA Director of Organizing and Recruitment, Brian Fisher, about the union hitting 400,000 members, the growth that made that possible, and the opportunities it creates for members across North America.
On the Workers' Mic, Ken and Phil discuss the Faster Labor Contract Act and why it's going to be a game changer for workers.
Alan David Freeman and Durham Association Educators member Carlos Perez joined the Labor Notes podcast to talk about how to keep going and continue organizing when it gets hard.
Can you do the closing without the script?
So that's it for the Labor Radio Podcast Weekly this week. Your sampler of some of the great shows that have come out from the Labor Radio Podcast Network. And not only that, we are all about the unions, which is why this podcast was recorded under a SAG-AFTRA collective agreement.
The opinions, ideas, and so forth of any of the shows do not necessarily represent the views of the Labor Radio Podcast Network, so please don't sue us.
It's getting hot, it's summery weather. If you want to support the network, you can get a Labour Radio Podcast Network t-shirt in black or grey, 2 colours, multiple different sizes, union made at labourradionetwork.org.
The Labor Radio Podcast Weekly is produced by me, Chris Garlock, with, of course, Patrick Dixon and Harold Phillips. Stay active.
Stay tuned to your local labor radio show or podcast.
And we'll see you next Friday.
Script? We don't need no stinking
Look
script.
at that.